Welcome to the call sheet. Today's guest is Rick Tejas. Rick is a producer of both reality shows and narrative feature films. His credits include The Surreal Life, The Road Rules, and the upcoming Amazon film A Million Miles Away. Thank you for being on the show, Rick. How are you doing?
Thanks, man. Good, doing good.
So you have sort of a strange path as a producer. You didn't actually start out in production or like as crew at all. You actually started as an actor. How did you come out to Hollywood as an actor? How did that happen?
Well, initially I came to Los Angeles to go to college. I went to school at UCLA, and while I was in school, I wanted to be an actor, and so, but I was too afraid to commit 100%. So instead of being a theater arts major, I was an economics major. I figured my brother was an econ major, so that must be easy. and then I took as many acting and production classes as I possibly could without being in the department. And then when I graduated, that's when I found the Estelle Harmon's Actors Workshop, and that's when it's important to get into a community right away. Whether it's an acting community or production community or something, where you're just around people doing what you're doing, and mine was a bunch of actors that were working. Some of them were working, some of them were not working, but we all were busy doing the deal at that time. It was probably 1985, I think it was.
So you acted, you had small roles, you did soap operas and that kind of thing, and you were like a working actor, like you had this was your job for a period of time.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first probably 3 years it wasn't. The first 3 or 4 years it was bit parts here and there, and just kind of. I actually had I met my wife Benita, who was an actress at that time too, and her older sister had gone to the Royal Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts.
Oh, wow.
And because I was a college graduate and I was only being brought in for East LA Cholo roles, which it was very bizarre. I did a movie called Colors with Sean Penn, and after that movie, I decided I'm going to go to London. So I auditioned, and both Benita and I got into the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, and so we went and studied Shakespeare for a year in London. And then when I came back, that's when I kind of crashed this audition, and where I met a woman named Mary Alice Bunim, who would later be the woman who hired me to come out to New York and do a soap opera. And then she created a little show called the Real World on MTV. And at that time, it was just, she sat me down. She said, I got to go back to New York. And John and I sold the show. And we're going to put kids in the house and follow them around with cameras. And I was like, okay, good luck with that. And, a year later, it became a phenomenon. And she knew at that time when I was in New York working on the soap that I just didn't want to be an actor, that I was bugging her to always be in the control room and bugging, directors to follow them, and just constantly just bug people just to ask questions. What do you do? What do you because it just fascinated me.
So how did that happen for you, that you were acting and you were, I mean, a lot of people just making a living at acting is sort of like a dream goal for them. How did you go from being a day player or making a living at it kind of actor to, I don't want to do it anymore, I want to talk to directors and producers? How do you do your job? How did that happen in your head?
Well, I think, like when I was on the soap, I was always curious, like how they put these things together, like, who did what and who was responsible for what jobs. And so I was, like I said, I was always bugging people, just asking them questions, and standing behind them and watching them, and, not getting in the way, but, just kind of, watching them. And so, Mary Ellis knew that. She knew that I wanted to do more than just that. So when she left me in New York, on the show, while she came back and did The Real World, her assistant, Matt Kunitz, was given his first producing job. And so he needed a very cheap production coordinator, and called me and said, "Hey, I hear you've been in production." And I was like, "Yeah." And not really, but yeah. And he said, "I have this job. What do you think?" And I was like, "Well, how much does it pay?" And I made more money in one day than I made in a whole week as the production coordinator, but I just said yes. And so it didn't matter how much money I was making. I just needed to get in. And so and that's where it started. And then once you got into the company, because, in the industry, we kind of make a joke, like, Bunim Murray was almost like, reality college. It was like going to production school. You learned by doing. And they didn't put you in positions where you could hurt the production, but they put you in positions where you would learn. You would be an assistant, you would be, an associate producer, you would be, and so you would be helping. But as you got more and more seasoned, you started moving up the ladder. And so by the time I left there, I was directing the shows.
Now, for our younger viewers, Real World, Road Rules, maybe Cops, if you want to throw that in there, they were reality. They were the earliest reality TV shows. We didn't even use that word back then, like reality.
There was nothing.
You were essentially inventing a new genre at that time in the early 90s. So
like, when we went the first season that we went to Europe, we had 24 crew members. And we came back and ready to kill each other because we were tired, and just, it was brutal. It was brutal. And 3 people now do the job that I did by myself.
Oh, wow.
So that would just tell you kind of how productions grew, because it was just too much. You just could, we were dying out there. And so they had to, fight for bigger budgets and more help and more people, and, giving people time off and stuff like that. But, I knew that I wanted to be a creative producer and not just a physical producer, which are two different avenues. If you're a line producer, production manager, things like that, you're physical production. You don't have really anything to do with the script. You're just taking that script or taking the project and just executing it. Whereas, if you're a creative producer, director, you're more shaping what you see on screen. And that's what I knew I wanted to do that. And that's what I was good at.
So tell us, you mentioned script, but you're talking about reality shows. A lot of people, there's a lot of debate about what is real and what isn't real, and that kind of thing when it comes to reality programming. Tell us what it was like to, like you said, you were inventing the genre and you were just running around filming people. What does that mean that you had a script? How did you go about talking to these people?
I shouldn't say you get, in reality, you get a script after you're done shooting. What happens is, and I tell people, and I kind of describe reality television as a lot like constructing a maze for mice to run through. Okay, and I'm not saying that the cast are mice. This is just to give you an illustration of what we do as producers. So we create like the hallways and all that, and we cast, people that are dynamic, that have strong personalities, that will react to things. And then as they go through that maze, you may close the door, you may open the door based on what they are doing and saying. You're not telling them what to say. Another way I explain it is like, if you were going to do a reality show about driving from Los Angeles to New York, that's the trip. And you're going to stop in Utah, you're going to stop in Denver, you're going to do a challenge in, Ohio. You're going to stop and do a lawnmower challenge somewhere along the way. But I don't know what the story is. The story is, well, they get a flat tire, they run out of food, Susie and Bob fight, they make up. I don't know what the story is. I know what the plot is, but I don't know what the story is. And so as story is happening along the way, that's what the directors are out there doing, is taking notes, and story people are taking notes so they can send that back to production, to the writer's room, so the writers can read what's happening out there and start constructing what an episode is going to look like.
Now, back in the day, did you feel an obligation to make sure that there was at least some degree of reality, that you weren't making up conflicts that weren't there, or inventing conversations that didn't actually happen? Did you try to avoid that kind of thing?
Yeah, at all. When we first started, we were instructed that, the only people that could talk to the cast was the director. That was it. No one else could talk to the cast. Crew people, sound people, nobody. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the cast used to think that we didn't like them because we didn't talk to them. And we were trying to tell them, hey, we've been instructed not to talk to you. Because if you're talking to us, we can't shoot you. If you're talking to each other, we can shoot you doing that. So, no. Now, I do think that as budgets got tighter, production got tighter and quicker, I think things were helped along. But one example is like on Surreal Life. In the first season, the cast members sit around a table, and we had these fortune cookies, and these fortune cookies had questions. Now the cast were told, you can write questions and put them inside the fortune cookie and give them to each other, or and we were going to provide some questions for us. So we had them sit in the living room, and they started doing it and opening them up and answering questions. We cut out the fortune cookies altogether, so it just looked like they were talking, and so it was just a conversation. Now, we didn't tell them what to say. We had some information that we wanted other people to know and stuff like that. But, and what their reactions were, or whether they wanted to talk about it or not talk about it, was up to them. Vince Neil talked about losing his little girl when she was little, how hard that was. And it was a bonding moment, but it was a pretty clever device to get them to come together. Is that scripting? I don't know.
That's interesting. Okay,
I think it's clever. It's clever, producing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I would never, and the audience at home would have no idea that that's what happened. And, well, speaking of putting people in situations and seeing how they react, you also worked on a show, a haunted house show on MTV called MTV's Fear, I believe it was called.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that, because again, that's a subgenre of reality that I think a lot of people are suspicious of. How what was your experience like that?
Well, it's interesting is that initially it was a 2-hour movie written that was pitched to an executive at MTV, and she thought, this isn't a movie, this is a reality show. And they shot a pilot, and it turned out pretty good. But then they brought in me and another producer to actually turn this into a series, because they had a long production schedule and a long editing schedule, and we didn't have that. And so we had to figure out how to truncate it down and turn it into a series and do it, travel around and do them. And I got to say, we found some pretty haunted places that we always joked. I said, you should turn the camera on the crew, because they're just as scared as the cast members. And the cast thought they were alone. They were by themselves. didn't see anybody but themselves, and they shot each other with cameras, and they had vests on, and so they, but it was, it, sometimes we would be surprised the footage we'd get back. We'd be like, holy smokes. So,
but you weren't
but
faking ghosts. You weren't making noises behind the walls.
No, they were in, what I did was, when the cast arrived on location, they would be in a hotel room, and the television was taken out, the radios were taken out, and only ghost books were left in the room with them. And they were there for probably 2 or 3 days, I think. So and then they would get hooded.
Oh.
and then put into a car by themselves with just a driver. And the driver would take them to locations. I'd have 6 vans, for all 6 cast members. And then each one would be hooded while they were brought into the location. And then they were told to sit in a circle, count to 100, and then you can take off your hoods.
That alone would scare me.
Yeah, but and I think that kind of primed them a little bit already. And then they were, they were so glad to see each other. They're like, oh my God, it's crazy. And then they would get to the computer, and the computer would start telling them, okay, and they were being told, pick a color. So you would pick a color, and you put it on your vest. So now I'm blue, you're yellow, she's green. And then it would say blue, first dare, blue. You got to go to the cemetery and blah, 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 blah. And so you would have to go do that there. And you could quit, but you would go home and not get the money.
Because you weren't interacting with them. You actually didn't know in advance who was going to be blue. So like there was still, there was stuff that's surprising to you.
Themselves.
So,
right.
Okay.
Right.
So yeah, so again,
it was all random. They're random.
You're creating a situation, and they're responding to the situation you've created, and whether that is, so it's not, there's no script, but it is. I mean, so there's a certain element of staginess to it.
Well,
it's not a documentary, but
we knew what the dares were,
right?
And and there was probably, for an hour show, you probably had 4 or 5 dares for an hour. So you had 4 or 5 dares, and they shot for 2 days, 2 nights in a row. And then we would come and grab the footage and start logging it and see what we got. And if there was one guy that stayed in there with them off camera, and he was like a tech guy that could answer their questions and help them if they got lost and things like that. But other than that, it was just, everything was set up for them, and they would do the dares and then come back.
Now, as a creative producer, whether it's Fear or Road Rules or one of those other shows, one of the maybe smaller ones that you worked on, did you ever run into a situation where you filmed for a long stretch of time and like nothing interesting happened for that episode, and like you had to figure it out? Like what do you do in the circumstance where I shouldn't say actors, where the cast are boring, for lack of a better word? How do you handle something like that?
Well, I think that like we did a show called Surf Girls for MTV, and most competitions are very, competitive and, kind of backstabbing and biting and things like that. What we didn't understand is, in the surfing world, they're all very like just chill with each other, and so it kind of turned into something different than we had anticipated. We thought it was going to be this cutthroat, fierce competition, and it wasn't. And that's how the cookie crumbles. You can't really turn it into something it's not.
So what is that? Oh, go on.
I was going to say I know that with the first or second, the Omarosa season with on Survivor, not Survivor, on The Apprentice, she was complaining that the producers made her look bad, and all the other cast said, no, that was you. It's just a heightened version of you, but that's you. And she may not have liked those things, but those things, so yeah, do you get a whole picture of everything? Not always, but we're not, if you're a good guy, we don't make you be a bad guy. If you're a bad guy, we could try to make you a little better, but you're a bad guy or you're a bad girl. I mean, you're just, can't really change that.
So how does the network respond? Because that, as a producer, that's who you're answering to. How does the network respond where you pitch a show of surf girls are competing and who's the better surfer? I don't know how you measure surfing, but you're pitching a competition show and then you get the footage back and they're all judges, cool and laid back.
Judges, yeah.
Oh, okay. But like, what does the network say, and what do you say to them when the show turns out to be something different than what you pitched?
Sometimes it's a long discussion. But unfortunately, it's just, the more, when we first started doing reality, I think people understood as reality kind of, as more cast people got more savvy with things and realized the louder they spoke, the more camera time that they felt that the camera was on them. So people started to pump things up, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I started veering away from reality and started doing more scripted stuff, was because of that, because I just didn't like the way that it was going. Because where do you go from that?
If it's fake, you might as well just write the script.
Yeah. Or if it's just kind of, I don't know about fake. Fake is not a word that I would use. Manipulate, I think, would be a little bit better than fake, because I don't think that people fake things like, I've never been around a production where, they told people, okay, now you need to cry, or now you need to do this. It's just, now if they were crying, but it wasn't, I've never been around a production like that, so I don't know.
And that's just not the kind of show that you would make.
Yeah, because for me, the shows that I like were shows like when we started is, the human condition. It was about the human condition, about what would you do. Like, I like that show Alone, where they drop those guys and they have to like go on their own.
Right.
I love that show because it's like it really is what it's challenging. It challenges you. And I don't feel like the producers are in there. If anything, you're like, get in there and help the guy. Because that bear is going to eat him,
Right.
or wolf or whatever the hell is chasing him. And then I like some of the shows up in Alaska. They're really great. So yeah, I mean, I think there are some producers who are really good at, being documentarians and knowing the structure of the show, but letting things happen as they happen.
Now, that's reality and scripted productions tend to be very sort of, they're entirely different departments at the networks and studios and stuff. They're different companies make them. And so when you decided you wanted to shift from reality to scripted, like, I'm sure you ran into people who are like, well, you don't know how to do a scripted show. Like, how did you convince people? Like, what did you like? What is your like pitch for saying I can actually produce a narrative show or movie or what,
Well, it's interesting is I'm watching this thing called The Offer right now about the making of The Godfather.
Oh yeah.
And I'm looking at him going, that's me. That's exactly what I'm doing, man. His assistant says, she goes, how long's your deal? He goes, it's a year. She goes, oh my God, that's not enough time. We got to find something that everybody else overlooked. And that's exactly what you need to do, is find things, because you're not going to compete with the William Morrises and the ICMs and the big law firms and all that stuff. So you got to find something that can resonate and somebody else has overlooked. And I found a book. I found a book about a Hispanic astronaut and his story is like the Rocky of astronauts. And he started out as, as a migrant farm worker and a child in the fields, and told his dad he wanted to be an astronaut. And I'll be damned, it took him 12 years of applying, but he finally got in, and then there was no guarantee he was going to make it. And, the only difference between him and his friends, and, his friends died, unfortunately. They, the only difference is family. His support system was different than his cousin and his friends, and they didn't have the same support system that he had, his parents and his family. And it's a great story, and I knew it was a great story, and I just happened to be at a library, and I looked over, I saw this book, and I'm like, what's this? And I turned it over, and I went, I called my buddy and said, hey, read this book, man. This is kind of an interesting book. And he read it, he goes, this is a movie. I said, I know. So I go, I got to find this guy. And so I ended up finding him. Luckily, he had done a deal with the director in Mexico, and it didn't really pan out, and the rights were available. And I made a deal with him. I said, we'll be partners, and, I'm not going to ask for a 2-year option. What I'll do is every step that I do, it extends. So if I can get, a writer on board, I get 6 months. If an agent gets on board, I get another year. And sure enough, I got enough people on board, and I put a package together, and we sold it. And now we're going into production. I mean, it's taken a long time. My son is now 4.5, going to be 5. And I was pitching the show to the writer that morning when he was probably 5 days old. And we still haven't shot it yet. So it tells you,
yeah, that's a long process. Yeah, your reality shows, they're pretty quick from inception to filming.
Yeah. I mean, they can be, you can be 9 months and you're in production, shooting and editing and delivering shows, by that time.
So what
I tell people all the time is save your money. Save your money, because the biggest problem in Hollywood is you make good money, but it's not like you make it all the time. And so you have to know how to manage your money, live below your means, and you'll be fine, because then you can have options and you're not just running from show to show or job to job.
Yeah, because my understanding, as a producer, you're only paid when the show is in production. And so if this whole time, the last several years, your son's entire lifetime, that you've been trying to get this movie going, you were working for free, essentially, trying to everything.
Basically, everybody else was working. The writer got paid to write the script, but we producers don't get paid until it actually goes into production, and then we start getting our fees.
So as a producer, and you're looking for ideas or whatever, you weren't going to the library to look for a book to option. You were just living your life, right? And it just had sort of an open mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right. Read. You have to read a lot, because you never. I tell my wife, she goes, "You said you read the paper every day." I said, "Yeah, but a lot of my ideas come from papers, from articles, from stories that I've read, from snippet. I found another story, and it was a story about homelessness, and this woman was quoted, and I was like, oh, I'm going to call her. And so I called her, and her story is incredible. And we're developing her life rights and she wanted to write it herself, and I don't think that she has the chops to do it. She did it, but I don't think she found the story. And so I'm trying to pair her up with another writer right now. But nobody's calling me and paying me to do this. I'm doing this all on my own. And so that's what you have to do. You have to just kind of hustle and get it done.
So
if you want to be a creative producer,
as a new father and a husband, and you're sort of trying to like take care of the family and stuff. You have your savings, like you said, but you must also, you're just doing reality shows or other gigs at the same time to sort of keep things going.
Yeah, well, luckily, for me, because the shows that we've done have been very successful, my company still participates in, because we owned a lot of what we did, which was lucky. I'm very grateful for that. And so that's been able to keep us, going while I'm looking for another gig or another job and things like that. So, I'm very, very, very grateful that I have options.
So part of being, so even though you wanted to be a creative producer and not a physical producer,
yeah,
you still have to worry about money a large part of the time, and it's just sort of part of your life.
I mean, I don't worry about my bills being paid month to month, but I certainly worry about, I try to live my life in 2-year increments, so I know for the next 2 years I'm okay, and then I'll make some money, and then we'll be like, okay, we're good for another 2 years. And so I've never been one to live paycheck to paycheck. And even when I was a kid, I was like that. If you gave me $10, I saved 5 of it and spent 5 with everybody else. And then everybody else would run out of money and I still had money. They'd be like, where did you get the money? I said, well, I didn't spend all mine.
Well, see,
but you were with us. I said, I know,
that's great advice for somebody who's even just starting out, like, because if you're a PA or an assistant or something, like you don't make a ton of money, but socking away a little bit at a time is always something that you ought to do.
Having roommates, having anything to help bring your bills down so you can sock away some money, so you can have options. To me, money means you have options.
So that astronaut project, it's really like exciting, and like it's like you said, it's a sort of science-based, but also like very like family oriented. It's a really great story, and I can imagine like a lot of people are interested in it. And you told me about, you sort of took it around to different studios and streamers and things like that. Where did it where was the first place that you actually like bit and said, oh, this is a good idea? How did we miss this the first time?
We went to every studio, all of them, and we went to the streamers, and 3 of them bid. It was Netflix, Amazon, and Disney. And Disney kind of dragged their feet a little bit, and Amazon kind of threw in a little bit, but not. Netflix was like, we're doing this. We're like, okay. And they seemed to be the place that was, the place to go. And so we were there for probably 2 years, developing the script, because the script wasn't written at that time. It was just a 15-page. Our writer put together like a 15-page presentation, and so she pitched it off of those 15 pages, and they fell in love with the story, and so then they paid her to write it, and it took months to do a deal, and then finally get her to write it, and then it was good, but she's unfortunately she's passed now, but she was a German woman, and a lot of the Latino flavor needed to be put in there. It was missed, and so we brought in a couple of Latino writer to really take it to the next level, and he did a really good job. And then that's when we started going out to actors, and we signed an actor, and we got a director on board, and we were just submitting budgets up until December of last year. And right before Christmas, we got a phone call, unfortunately, that Netflix had changed their mind, that they had some internal things going on, and that they were going to put in turnaround. So they put it in turnaround, and turnaround is like a pool of scripts that people have put money into. That's almost like on an auction block, and so anybody else can pick it up. And fortunately for us, our director was having dinner with the head of Amazon and was telling her about what she was doing. And she was like, oh, we would have done that movie. And so in January, we said, well, you can now. And so they picked it up. And so now we're back on track, which is I'm very grateful.
Yeah. For anybody who's
watching,
doesn't
always happen.
For anyone who's watching this later on, this is the internal strife was Netflix lost a bunch of subscribers and their stock tanked in the last couple of weeks, and they cut way back. But you were able to switch to Amazon basically just because somebody had lunch with somebody.
Well, they had, I mean, the director was having lunch with the head of Amazon and was telling her, because they want to work with her because she's a great director. She's really good, and so she was telling them about the projects that she's working on, and they said, "Man, they should have brought that here." And we're like, "Well, we kind of did, but." But now by then it was a full script, and deals were done and everything, so it was a much easier transition for them. So. But now we're back on track. So,
there was a window of time.
End of July.
But there was a window of time right in there that you were not sure what was going to happen.
From probably December 15th to February, but probably the first or second week of February, we were all bummed out.
So it's
all bummed out.
It's a very exciting script, and I can imagine why. What would you say to somebody who's sort of a young aspiring producer who's doing their first independent film, and they have everything together, and then the financing falls apart for whatever? Obviously, we're not talking at the high level of Netflix or whatever, but someone who's making a low budget 6-figure 7-figure movie, and financing falls through in a similar way. How do you handle that? How would you suggest to a young person handling that emotionally, or how do you deal with something like that where you think the thing you've been working on for years is gone?
Well, it's interesting. People were asking me, are you bummed out? I said, yeah, I'm bummed out, but that's the business. And it's like I said, The Godfather, this is the business you've chosen. And you could leave this business if you don't want to be in it, but it's a tough business, and it's sometimes you have to deal with that, and you just dust yourself off, get up the next day, and figure out, okay, if this is a story that you want to get done and you want to tell it, how do you do that? I was told, you're a TV producer. What, you can't produce a film. What, you can't do that. And here I am producing it with, our partners that, my agent, the agent that I got involved with this, she's like, we need to partner you up with somebody who's a very reputable film producer. And, I understood that you need to make the package as undeniable as possible. So they can't say no, that this is just, it's too good to say no. I had a great writer, we had a great producer, and our partner, had my partner Benito is a big actor and everybody knows him, and me, and we were all in the room. And so when we went in there, and Mark and his partner Campbell, and it was already there. I mean, there was no it was ready. It was ready.
That's a really great a positive attitude to end this episode on. I think just keep going, whether it all falls apart, to just believe in your package and your team, and believe in the story, and you will just keep going, and maybe your director will have lunch with the head of Amazon. But even if that's not what it is, something, as long as you keep trying, something is going to happen.
Sure. And that's what I say is, if the story is a good story and it has legs and it's who could have, even foretold that, our director's going to have lunch with the head of Amazon, and
Right.
then they were going to talk, and then this was going to fall through, and then you couldn't have. I mean, it's just, come on, it's like divine intervention.
Thank you for watching The Call Sheet. If you found this interview helpful and interesting, please like, share, subscribe, and all the other things I'm supposed to say at the end of a YouTube video.